Hello and welcome to our meetup tonight. I am recording this early, so I will be available in the chat during the meetup to answer any questions and to have some discussion, and then I'll be back on video after this presentation, and we can have more discussion around tonight's topic, which is the WCAG 2.2 working draft. For those of you who don't know, the WCAG working group has released a new draft following the 2.1 draft and finalization of that. And we're going to kind of talk through the new success criterion and what WCAG is, just so we all have a level playing field for that. And then a little bit about me. I am Courtney Heitman. I am a technical accessibility specialist at Gallup. My days consist of talking to clients about accessibility, managing our accessibility roadmaps, helping developers with questions about writing accessible code, as well as driving accessibility initiatives within the company. And part of that is keeping up to date on what the WCAG requirements are, so I can help prep the company so we are prepared for when they get updated. So what is WCAG? WCAG stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They are developed through the W3C WAI group, which is the World Wide Web Consortium Web Accessibility Initiative. If you haven't visited the Web Accessibility Initiative webpage, I would highly recommend it. I was in a webinar probably back in June or July, I would guess, and over half of the people who were accessibility professionals had not been to that website. And it's one that I go to on a daily basis and would highly recommend that all of you go to on a normal basis as well. The goal of WCAG was to provide a single shared standard for web content accessibility that meets the needs of individuals, organizations, and governments internationally. It was originally published in December of 2008, and then as WCAG 2.0. WCAG 2.1 was published in June 2018. There was a lot that changed between 2008 and 2018, mainly mobile phones becoming a thing. The first iPhone came out in 2008. So that was a lot of what the 2.1 draft focused on was mobile accessibility and cognitive disabilities. The technical documents are developed by the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, or the AGWG. And then a little bit about WCAG conformance. There are 3 different levels, A, AA, and AAA. The standards range from a minimum to a strict requirement. Most companies strive to meet level AA if they're meeting one. It's kind of rare that you see either of the other 2 mentioned. But there are good guidelines to follow, and in order to meet AA, you have to meet A. So, good to know. WCAG conformance is for full web pages only, so you will see an entire web page. You don't get to see, like, the little search box is WCAG conformant. You do, and, like, that's important, but when you're filling out VPATs or other things regarding WCAG conformance, it's for the full web page. It's also complete processes, so you will often see in accessibility audits where people will go through a complete workflow, whether that's a user sign up or a user doing something within your system. It'll be the complete process from start to finish for that. All information must be available to all users. We don't want to exclude anyone. As Tim Berners-Lee has said, the web is a great equalizer. And it's for everyone, so we should make sure that it remains for everyone. Non-accessible information does not deter users. So there are definitely parts of websites that are non-accessible, but don't deter users. I often see, especially within Gallup content, we will have charts that are very complicated to explain to someone in alt text because it's a whole chart of data. Because we're a very data and analytics heavy company, but they will be in a news article that the whole article basically explains the chart. And so oftentimes the alt text is that this information is explained within the article, because it is. And there are other instances of that across the web. On a more granular level, what does WCAG cover? Can you use it with a keyboard? We need to be cognizant that people who are using not able to use a mouse can and can still navigate the web. Do you depend on color? Oftentimes, red equals bad, green equals good. And you'll see error messages that the only way that you can tell that they're an error message is that they're red. And that doesn't work well for people who are colorblind. So we need to make sure that we are putting an icon with it or what have you. The same goes for like change. They need to have an arrow that's a red down arrow or a green up arrow or whatever. Do you have captioning on videos? There are a surprisingly high number and ever-growing number of people who have a hearing disability or hearing loss. Part of this is due to our rapidly aging population around the world. And then we also have to be cognizant of people who are deaf. Like, they need captioning to be able to understand what's going on. Do you have alt text? It's best that we can describe images, whether they're sensory or informational, to users, and to mark things that are truly decorative as decorative. Do you have a skip nav? If you're navigating with a keyboard, it's really nice to not be able to have to tab through every single navigation item on a website in order to get to the content that you really want. So we should put skip navs on things. Will this cause seizures? We need to be aware if we have videos or GIFs or other moving content that causes 3 flashes in under 1 second. There are cases where there's actually a Pokemon episode where Pikachu flashed a bunch of times, and it caused a bunch of kids to have seizures as they were watching it because it was the first time that they had been exposed to flashing of that magnitude. And that is not a good thing. No one wants that. So we should be cognizant of how many flashes we put in videos and stuff. Is focus visible? If you're navigating with a keyboard, it's really handy to know where you're at on a page. Is there proper error messaging? It can be hard for normal able-bodied users to understand that they entered their username and password wrong or other forms of errors, and we should be especially cognizant of people who are not as abled as us, whether they're using a screen reader, whether they have a traumatic brain injury, or what have you. We should make sure that people can properly understand what's going on with the error they are receiving. So now for the meat of the presentation, what all brought you here. WCAG 2.2. There are 9 proposed new additions, and it's important to note that this draft is not final. None of these are guaranteed. There's a chance that the wording could change. There's a chance that they could not be included at all in 2.2. And I'm going to spend the rest of my presentation talking about the additions. There is one change that we should all be aware of, and that is for success criterion 2.4.7, which is focus visible. They want to move this from a level AA requirement to a level A requirement. So this would make it better accessible for people who have who use a keyboard to navigate or what have you, to have better focus at a lower level of WCAG conformance. Which is a good thing. And before I launch into these, I will note I'm going to read all of these from, I basically just copied and pasted from the WCAG draft content of what the rule will be, the success criterion rule will be, and then what examples they had on there. And a lot of these, I read them and I was like, yep, I agree with that. Like, not a big deal. Like, don't really have any questions type things, and there are a few that are a little more controversial, so those are the ones I'm going to dive into, but I think it's best if we all know a little bit about all of them. So we'll start with some of the easier ones. This first one is success criterion 2.5.7. It's for dragging, and it's a level AA. All functionality that uses a dragging movement for operation can be operated by a single pointer without dragging unless dragging is essential. And what this means is I think these examples do a better job of explaining it. You might have a sortable list of elements that has one of the little gripper things where you like pick it up and drag it and move it either with your finger or with a mouse. And while having a gripper is useful and handy for people who can use it, we should also make sure that if you focus on that we can provide adjacent controls for moving the element up and down in the list by simply tapping or clicking on those controls. So that could be as easy as putting arrows there too. So you could tap the up arrow to move it up 3 spaces or what have you. This is also useful for Kanban implementations like Trello and Jira, and they may provide an additional pop-up menu for focused elements that can be activated by a simple set of clicks or taps, providing an option for moving the item from one Kanban silo to another. Jira already does this. They have a pop-up, and then I believe Trello has a pop-up that has a drop-down that you can move it between the different statuses. That one was pretty straightforward. I didn't really have any questions, but I can pause the video here if anyone has any, and we can talk through them. And then if not, let's go on to success criterion 2.5.8, which is pointer target spacing. It's a level AA requirement. For each target, there is an area with a width and height of at least 44 CSS pixels that includes it and no other targets except when there is a mechanism available to change the CSS pixel size of each target or its spacing. So there is an area with a width and height of at least 44 CSS pixels that includes it and no other targets. The target is in a sentence or a block of text, so this would be links with an article copy and that type of thing. And then a user agent, so the size of the target is controlled by the user agent and is not modified by the author. This would be a standard default button that you're getting from Chrome or iOS or what have you. And then it's essential, so it's a particular presentation of the target is essential to the information being conveyed. So this could be that it needs to be sitting on a specific like part of an image or what have you. Some examples. This is the only picture. Well, there's 2 pictures. This one and the next one are the only 2 pictures I have in this presentation. This one shows a row of icons. It's a house, a phone, a printer, a folder, a person, and then a camera. And it shows that they're vertically and horizontally 44 by 44 pixels. And this one would meet the success criterion because they are the right dimensions. And then for the next one, the icons are actually smaller. They're 38 by 38 pixels. And they've added 6 pixels of CSS spacing. So 38 plus 6 would equal 44 pixels, which would allow this to meet the requirement on the horizontal ways. And then vertically, there is nothing above or below it that we can see in the picture, so it also meets the success criterion. Basically, this is to allow us to not fat finger buttons as we tap them on our mobile phones or have any other issues that people might have while they're trying to click on things. The next success criterion is 2.4.11, and then the one after this is also related to this. It is the level AAA version. So this is for focus appearance minimum. This is the level AA. For the keyboard focus indicator of each user interface component, all of the following are true. There is a minimum area where the focus indication area is greater than or equal to 1 CSS pixel border of the focus control, or has a thickness of at least 8 CSS pixels along the shortest side of the element. You will often see this as like almost like a highlight around a link. And then there needs to be a change of contrast. So the color change for the focus indication area has a contrast ratio of at least 3:1 with the colors of the unfocused state. And then there's adjacent contrast. So the focus indication area has a contrast ratio of at least 3:1 against adjacent colors for the minimum area or greater, and has a thickness of at least 2 CSS pixels. So these I'm going to talk about kind of in combo. So we need to make sure that the change of contrast for the focus state is a 3:1 change from the background or within the link. And then we need to make sure that it has enough 3:1 contrast ratio with things that it is adjacent to. And this is already kind of written this way in some of the contrast minimums for links in 3.1. They're just making it a smidge bit clearer. Or for the 3:1 ratio, they're just making it clearer. And then it needs to be unobscured. The item with focus is not entirely hidden by author-created content. Some examples of this. When links receive focus, an outline is displayed around the link that contrasts with the background adjacent to the link. When buttons receive focus, an outline is displayed within the button around the text that contrasts with the button's background. When text fields receive focus, an outline is displayed around the field, indicating that the input has focus. And when buttons receive focus, an outline is displayed around the control, indicating that the input has focus. So these are all pretty common examples of things that happen where we will give focus to an element. And then the interesting thing about the radio buttons one is currently the WebKit radio buttons do not have enough contrast. They're not 3:1. So it will be interesting to see if the WebKit team fixes those. So we'll see. And then let's move on to the AAA version of this. So this is Success Criterion 2.4.12, and it is Focus Appearance Enhanced. The big things to note here is that the focus indication area goes up by 1 CSS pixel, and then the contrast ratio goes from 3:1 to 4.5. So let me read through this. For the keyboard focus indicator of each user interface component, all of the following are true. There is a minimum area where the focus indication area is greater than or equal to a 2 CSS pixel solid border around the control. There is a change of contrast where color changes used to indicate focus have created a ratio of at least 4.5:1 with the colors changed from the unfocused control, and that it's unobscured, so no part of the focus indicator is hidden by author-created content. Some examples of this, which are very similar to the examples that I just gave for the focus appearance minimum. When links receive focus, an outline is displayed around the link that contrasts within the background adjacent to the link. When buttons receive focus, an outline is displayed around the button and around the text that contrasts with the button's background. When text fields receive focus, an outline is displayed around the field, indicating that the input has focus. And when radio buttons receive focus, an outline is displayed around the control, indicating that the input has had focused. As I said, the big things to note are the difference in the contrast ratio and the difference in the width of the CSS pixels. So from 3:1 to 4.5:1, and from 1 pixel to 2 pixels. Both of these I thought were really good success criterion, and because focus is generally lacking on the web. So I thought they were both really good. And now we'll move on to success criterion 2.4.13 for fixed reference points. This is a level A. When a web page or set of web pages is an electronic publication with page break locators, a mechanism is available to navigate each locator, and each locator maintains its place in the flow of content, even when the formatting or platform changes. And so most of you are probably like, what does that even mean? Which is where the examples are going to come in. So an example is if you have an electronic publication or an EPUB document, it includes navigation to page number references that match the paper version of the publication. So oftentimes you will see in ebooks or PDFs where the page numbers don't correlate because that's not how the book was printed, and this would fix that. Okay, on to the next one. This is Success Criterion 3.2.6 for findable help. It is also a level A. For single web page applications or any set of web pages, if one of the following is available, then access to at least one option is included in the same relative order on each page. Human contact details, human contact mechanism, this would be like a contact form, a self-help option, and a fully automated contact mechanism. So the examples for this, because I think they do a better job of explaining them, is an online application. Some of the application questions may be hard for new job seekers to understand, even after reading the contextual help. For example, the form may request their identification number, but they may have several and not know which one to enter. Easily findable contact information will enable them to use phone or email so they can get an answer to their question. And then the other one is a medical appointment scheduling form. When the service a patient is trying to book is not easily findable within the interface, they may need human help. A built-in messaging option, like a chat client, enables them to quickly interact with a staff person that can help without requiring them to manage a second interface. I thought these were both really good. It can be really hard to find help sections on websites and actually get connected to someone who is an individual who can actually answer your question and not just routed to something that is a FAQ page that you can never find the answer that you actually need. The next success criterion is 3.2.7, and it's for hidden controls. It's level AA. Controls needed to progress or complete a process are visible at the time that they are needed without requiring pointer hover or keyboard focus, or a mechanism is available to make them persistently visible. So the big things for this is a lot of this is going to be for web editors, so like WCAG editor type things. And so the examples are web editor success. In a web editor, once a page is open for editing, all the possible locations for editing display a pencil icon. So this would be if you were on like a Squarespace type site, you would be able to see like what all you could edit all at once. And then another web editor success is in a web editor, the possible locations for editing are hidden until a user hovers over them, but a radio button and settings can be changed so that the icons are all shown by default. And then the third example is for email success. When writing an email, controls needed to trash or forward the email are hidden by hover on the email list page, but visibly persistent at the top of the email screen. So that would allow things, I know Gmail hides some of the icons occasionally as you scroll, and so that would make it persistent across the top, but like the closer ones on mobile or whatever would be there when you needed them to be. This next one is probably the most controversial one out of the bunch, I think. And it is for Success Criterion 3.3.7 for accessible authentication, and it is a level A requirement. If an authentication process relies on a cognitive function test, at least one other method must also be available that does not rely on a cognitive function test. And then I have a bunch of examples on here that I'm going to read. And then I'll give you some insight about what I think and what I wrote as comments on this one. So the examples. A website uses a properly marked up email and password as the login authentication. That would be a good one. The next example is a website uses WebAuthn so the user can authenticate with their device instead of a username and password. The user's device could use any available modality. Common methods on laptops and phones are facial scans, fingerprints, and PIN numbers. The website is not enforcing any particular use. It is assumed the user will set up a method that suits them. The third example, a website offers the ability to log in with a third-party provider using the OAuth method. And then the fourth example, a website that requires two-factor authentication allows for multiple options for the second factor, including a USB-based method where the user simply presses a button to enter a time-based token. I think all of these are good. There is, when you go through and read the longer webpage on this, they use email and username interchangeably, which you can kind of see in the examples here. The first one uses email and password, and the second one uses username and password, which I think needs a bit of clarity because there are websites that use emails as usernames, and there are websites that use two different ones, and what that means, which was one of the comments I made. And then the other comment I made revolved around the cognitive function test part of it, which is in this original like short snippet. You will often see that websites have like CAPTCHAs and other cognitive function tests where you have to memorize or copy a set of letters and numbers or click on all the pictures of a taxi or whatever as a way to make sure that you're not a bot. And what does that mean long term? Like, can we not use CAPTCHAs on authentication forms anymore? So those were the two big things that I saw from here. I suspect that this one will be a big deal. It looked like it had a bunch of comments on the GitHub, which I linked to at the end of the presentation. So you guys can go through and look and see where, like, what's been updated since this. But yes, I think this one will be a big deal long term. And I think it'll make the web more accessible for everyone. And I think it's a really good thing for in the long run. And then it looks like I think we have one last criterion, and then we're through the 9 new ones. So let's talk about success criterion 3.3.8, which is redundant entry. It is also a level A. And for steps in a process, information previously entered by or provided to the user that is required on subsequent steps is either auto-populated or available for the user to select. The exception is when re-entering the information is essential. I assume that this would be like enter your email twice so we can make sure that you typed it right, or enter your password twice so we know that you typed it right, and that type of stuff. There could also be redundant entry in like e-com land for credit cards and that type of stuff. Some examples in here. A form requests that the user's corporate identification number in the first step of a process to purchase a new computer. In the third step, the user is asked to confirm that the computer will belong to the user rather than a colleague and re-shows the ID number. It allows the user to change the ID, but defaults to the previously entered one. And then the other example is a form on an e-commerce website allows the user to confirm that the billing address and delivery address are the same address. And you see that one fairly often currently already. I like this one because it will involve all of us typing less on the internet, which I am all for. But that concludes the new success criterions. I'm going to give you some resources, and then we can have some time to chat about all of them. If you want to look at the WCAG resources, the first link up here is to the W3 website, and this will give you the wider review for WCAG 2.2. It has all the detailed like understanding and how to meet pages, and all the info that you would need about the different proposed draft criterion. And then the second link up there is to the W3C GitHub. And this is where they're tracking all the public comments and trying to resolve them to get the 2.2 draft up to speed. The public comment period ended on September 18th of this year, but you'll still see some issues being worked through. They're expecting that the 2.2 draft will be out in summer of next year, so 2021. And we'll see. We'll see what of these ends up and how many of these have edits to them. So it'll be interesting to see. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and we can talk about questions in the meeting.